Welcome, everybody. My name is Álvaro Villagran. I am a program manager at the Shared Use Mobility Center. I'm an Hispanic male originally from Argentina with a background in history, policy, and planning. I'm joining you all from North Carolina and wearing a light blue shirt. It is my pleasure to welcome you to the session Moving Shared Mobility from Shiny to Standard. The panelists in this session will share a conversation about the evolution of pilot projects into permanent services and discuss the challenges and lessons learned in that journey. We welcome today Penny Grellier, the Community Development Administrator for Pierce Transit, who managed Pierce Transit Limited Access Connections Project, an MOD sandbox funded pilot that evolved into a first and last mile MicroTransit pilot. We also welcome Marco Viviani, Vice President of Communauto, whose involvement in car sharing began in 1997, and since 2003, he has worked with Communauto in Canada to develop car sharing from niche to mainstream mobility options. And we're also joined today by Jensen, who is the communication specialist at TransLoc, and also she's the co-host of the Movement Podcast, a weekly show about what it will take to create a verdant, equitable, and accessible mobility future we all deserve. Thank you all three for joining us today. Planning and launching new mobility services is a challenging endeavor. Getting from pilot to permanent is not much easier task to achieve either. In both cases, you are promoting change and you're building the big shift. So to start today's conversation, I will ask you, what lessons have you learned about how to communicate new mobility services to the communities and organizations you work with?
Hi, everyone. This is Penny here. Just as an introduction, I am a Caucasian female. Today, I'm wearing a red blouse with floral print, and I'm coming to you from Tacoma, Washington State. Just to answer the first question posed, I think one of the things as a public transit company that we found important was to let our customers know that the on-demand service we were offering was something that was designed to support transit system, not a standalone service. Many of our customers had been used to using public transit for a long while, and the idea of an on-demand service in partnership with a transportation networking company, as was the case with our project, was something that was very new and was something that we felt our customers needed to feel was another tool in our public transit toolkit rather than a standalone service. So in promoting the service, we made sure to let people know that we had heard what they said to us through customer comments and surveys, that getting to and from a bus stop was often challenging. And so we were responding to that commentary by providing this on-demand service. So again, the importance of communicating that it was part of something we offered as their trusted public transit company, and then also that it was designed in response to the needs they had expressed to us. I think those things are important when rolling out something that's very new and different to the public.
I go starting from this. I'm Marco Viviani. I'm a middle-aged man from Montreal. I'm an Italian, so my native language is Italian. I live in a French-speaking province, Quebec, and so my English is not really my cup of tea. So I beg your pardon if I will use some weird word in the context and so on. To answer the question, well, we started 27 years ago. So our pilot started long ago with 3 cars. Now we have around 4,000 in 16 cities, and so the point of communicating was crucial because people, Communauto is the oldest car sharing organization in North America. No one knew what car sharing was at the time, and so the big challenge was to communicate to people what we intend to do and how we fit to their mobility needs. And this is a little bit one of the crucial point, I think, in all pilot regarding new mobility, is to fit with the needs of your user, of the population. And so the best way for us to express this was through example. The more people use the service, or try to understand it and speak about, and the more it's easy to convince other people that maybe to look into this. And that's what's happened since the beginning. When we started, there was no internet. The example from people using or starting using the service has been the best way for us to communicate. At the beginning was, mouth to mouth, people to people. Now it's, sometime influencer, or, using digital channel. But since the beginning, even if now we have more sophisticated marketing and communication channels, the example from other people that explain how it works, that make you understand how a new mobility option could fit with your needs and your usage is crucial, and is the point. Without this, you can't have a pilot that is successful.
I'm Lauren Jensen. I am a Black female. I'm coming from Durham, North Carolina. I'm with TransLoc, and I think that Penny and Marco both hit on some really important parts. I think one of the big things that we've learned at TransLoc is, so we are also a private sector company. So we work with transit providers, transit agencies, universities, business centers to help provide mobility to their riders and clients. But I think it's really important to communicate early and communicate often. I think that if the end user, which would be the rider, is engaged in the process from the beginning, understanding those needs, then communication thereafter will be much simpler. And I think that the program can be much more effective. Of course, you have to do so simply in a way that people understand things. Tech and transit are really can be really complex language. So we need to do it in a way that people understand, as Marco and Penny pointed out, that this is for them. And it's not something that's just going to go away. It's not standalone products. This is a part of a service that will benefit them in the end. So that end, TransLoc has a marketing services plan where we help transit providers do marketing services to communicate with their riders in really simplified ways. But I think another important tool that we use is we have a partnership with an organization called Public Input, where we survey riders. So we can send them text messages, we can send emails to help people understand what it is that they need in their community, what they want, where they want to go, when do they want to go there, what are going to be the best routes, the best way to implement these programs so that they're successful and they're not just one-time things. Penny, I want to hear more about your program. So I know that one of the biggest things that can get in the way is getting people on board with this. So was that a problem at Pierce County? And if so, how did you guys do that? How did you get important, public facing and internal stakeholders on board?
Well, it was slow in the beginning with our pilot because it was so new and different from anything else we'd ever done. Just to give some background, we received the FTA's Mobility on Demand Sandbox funding, and we designed a first mile, last mile service in partnership with Lyft. The program ran for about 18 months. And when we ended the program, we looked at the lessons we learned from it and how we might move forward with those lessons. So we're just right now about to launch an on-demand service that goes towards the same goal of giving people connections in areas that don't have great transit service. But one of the things that we felt was important, obviously, as a public transit entity, we have to think about all of the users and their various abilities and their access to different services and their understanding of technology. And so when we made our marketing plan and designed the service, we wanted to make sure that we left no marketing stone unturned. So we were advertising, of course, an app-based on-demand service, but we also had a call-in option so that those without smartphones or credit cards could utilize it. We offered the service free of charge because we felt that made it the most accessible to all people. And we went to all different kinds of advertising, good old fashioned paper brochures and posters, all the way up to social media, boosted Facebook ads and things like that, stuff on our website. We worked with our regional transit partner and a local community college to get the word out to possible customers, because our service happened to overlap with some of the things they were looking to work with on, transit improvements. So working with the community and different agencies ahead of time was really important so that we could kind of activate their marketing and promotional opportunities in conjunction with what we were doing in-house. So I think it took people a little while to realize this thing is out there. It's free to me. It does involve me using something called Lyft, which I may or may not have used before. But when they started using it, the feedback that we got from customers was, oh, this is great. Now I can get to the bus that I couldn't get to before. And so people, I think what Marco said, that word of mouth, you can have all the high-tech bells and whistles, which appeal to a lot of people, but word of mouth, it's never too old or outdated to use that. That's for sure.
There's a point that made me think. At the beginning you said it's slow. It was slow at the beginning, and when you have to do with behavioral shift, it's always slow. And I just wanted to tell you a short story. At the beginning, we started with 3 cars, and after the first year, I think we had like 25. For us, was a success. And for many people we were speaking with was a failure, because, and so the point is, in a pilot in this kind of area, for at least for what we understand, finding the right speed and finding the right time to achieve what you want to achieve is crucial. And so I wanted to ask you, both of you, how you cope with this idea that maybe at the beginning, the first year, after the second year, the performance that you perceive as a success is not perceived as a success by other stakeholders that could support you and make your pilot permanent. So how you succeed and how you measure your performances and convinced that this was enough to pass from pilot to permanent.
I guess I could. Well, I think you're spot on with that, Marco, because when we started with our pilot, and like I said, it was slow. I have a feeling, at least I know I was, as the project manager, comparing with our neighbors to the north in Seattle, who have a much larger, more robust transit system. And they had a pilot going on. And I thought, gosh, look at those numbers they have. Ours are tiny compared to that. But what we realized was, you do have to look at your service area, maybe even your geography, how public transit is utilized in your specific area, and decide what you're going to define as a success. We had at the beginning of our pilot determined a certain number of rides we wanted to achieve per day. And we got close, but we didn't quite get to what we projected. But in hindsight, I think the lessons that we gathered from the pilot have been very valuable in putting together this next iteration of on-demand service, and being able to share what we learned in forums such as this and talk with others who are thinking about hosting an on-demand service. All of those are could be called successes because we're able to share that information. And I'm always careful to tell people who ask me about starting a service, make sure that you're thinking about what's successful to you in your particular, geographic area or in your situation with your audience, your participants, because it may not be what a larger transit agency or a private group in a different state or country determines is the success. So to us, we want to make sure that we're being good stewards of public funds. So we have to make sure that it comes out when you crunch the numbers cost wise to be as effective or, more effective than something that would be like private pay, let's say. So, there's the cost consideration, but also that the idea that your success may be defined differently than your neighbor, depending on who you serve and what kind of service you provide.
Mhm, mhm.
Right. I think Penny is spot on. So as a private company, I mean, there's a few simple ways to define success, which is like, did we keep the business, right? But what's a success for us may not be a success for some of our partners and vice versa. So I think that there are a ton of things to look at, but I think the most important thing is are we living our mission? Are we providing mobility to people? Did more people use this service? Do more people now have access to education, opportunity, healthcare, and any number of things that they didn't have easy access to prior? So I think those are the most important things to look at. But we can take some of those lessons when we do a pilot, or we're still in the middle of a pilot and we're either talk about moving forward, or there's an RFP going on and that we're applying for. Even if we're not necessarily selected to carry out the program permanently, but did the transit agency that we worked with, are they still going to continue this, whether they work with us or something else? Did they find value in what we're providing, whether they're getting it from us or someone else? And if the answer is yes, then we've succeeded. And sometimes maybe the answer is, okay, so we can't move forward right now. We need to go back and rethink all of these things. But if we come back in a year and we decide, oh, hey, yeah, this is a really valuable thing, people need this, let's do this, then I think that all in all, it's a hitch. It's all about providing a service to people. If people are now more mobile, then we've been successful. Or if they've learned lessons that will help them and their communities move around better, then I think it's been successful. Marco, what about for you? And again, you're also on the private side. So what are some of those things that you have to think about as you're providing a service to communities? How do you align yourself with the needs of the communities that you're in?
I think that the most important things in the story of Communauto is that started from a need of people. At the beginning, Communauto was a cooperative with a founder that was, had a vision, but his vision was, to build something that was useful for him. And he discovered that this was something that was useful for others. So I guess that, then of course now with a little bit more sophisticated way, we try to speak and to understand with our users which are their needs and how to shape the service to fulfill them at the best. But finally, what is important is that we are the user of our service. We understand that this is a way for us to access to mobility service without the need of owning a car. And this is probably one of the major point of Communauto. Communauto is a company, but it has a special mission that is the one of providing an alternative to car ownership, because we think that owning a car is one of the main problem in urban mobility. When you have a car, you use it despite the fact that it's the best solution to use it. And instead, if we can bring a service, you can increase the use of all the mobility options. And so with this idea, it's much easier to fit with the need of people and to shape the service, evolving with technology, with funding, with marketing. In 27 years, you can understand that we change many times our way of doing. But finally, is because we test the service, we use the service for ourselves and for people like us, and so that we are able to understand a part of our user needs.
Marco, that reminds me, there's not many projects in the shared mobility space, and particularly around car sharing, have been around for a long time. They're not always economically viable, particularly as an independent organization. So why do you think this is? And what are those nuggets, those recipes for success, other than you guys think about if this were?
I think that especially in car sharing space, there's sometimes a lack of alignment between the objective and the kind of service that you provide. We saw in our history many services coming and leaving and so on around, and most of the time is because their objective was not aligned. Means the idea was to replace car ownership, to offer a new mobility option, but in reality was having a fast profitability or testing electric cars or whatever, and when the service doesn't fit, or the offer doesn't fit with the need and the objective, or the real objective of a car sharing, probably you won't succeed. And this is, I guess this is the main lesson that we learned. We started from a need, and we try to align all our efforts to this goal, that is replace car ownership by a service. Then of course the other things that counts, and I guess this is valuable for all pilot project. There's a pace, there's a speed in which you can convince people to change your mind. And when you invest too much to be too fast, well, you just waste money and you waste resources that you will lack after. So controlling the costs and going at the right speed, fixing the right goals, and sometimes being not too ambitious, it's a way to succeed in the long terms. And I think these are some of the key factors that makes some car sharing service viable and many of them not.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that that's really important to always bear in mind, again, who we are doing these things for us, when our engineers are doing code, it's important to remember that those are not just zeros and ones on the computer. You are building something for real people that are really going to use this and really depend on it. And that needs to be at the forefront of everything that we do. Otherwise it's just kind of it's a money grab. And obviously we want to make business, but we want to impact people and impact the way that people move about. So for me, that's super, super important. And yeah.
And this is a question for both of you, is one major things that affected us and hopefully we find a way to manage this, was the funding. Pilot sometime is you can access to some kind of fundings, but then to be permanent, it's another story. So, Communauto succeeded in this because at the beginning, but still now, eventually, some of our packages are connected to a refundable bond. So people, they financed the service. At the beginning was the only way to be a member, to be a user. Now is not anymore, but still, was a kind of car out financing, 25 years ago when no one knew what crowdfunding was. But this allowed us to have several millions coming in and sustaining the project after the pilot. But this is I think it's a crucial thing for someone that want to launch a pilot. So I wanted to have your point of view on this.
Yeah, I can speak a little bit to that from the public transit perspective. So we have kind of a variety of funding sources available, but they all, have specific ways in which they may be used. And so for our initial pilot, we got the funding from the FTA to do the Mobility on Demand project. And that was research funding. So the idea behind research funding, of course, is to help support kind of trial and error situations. So there were some federal regulations that didn't necessarily apply during the sandbox funding, so that we could kind of, test the waters and try different things. That was great, except for when our pilot project ended, we had to consider those regulations moving forward. And in fact, one of those was something that kind of in the end prevented us from moving our pilot forward in it to be exactly how it had been during the pilot phase. And that was just simply because we couldn't find additional partners to come in and do the project with us, which would have been kind of required to carry on that exact same project. What we have done is we now have some funding that's come through our State Department of Transportation that is helping support the next iteration of our on-demand service. And that's some funding, that is looking to help special needs populations, and then also to help out in an manufacturing industrial center that we have in our service area. So that was something that was found by our grants manager, in looking for ways to further support the projects. We invited some kind of private partnerships to occur when we were developing our on-demand service, local hotels and developers and things like that, our local parks department, because we felt they had stakeholders who could benefit from the project. I think because the project was new and untested, they did not give any financial support in this particular situation, but I think going forward, it's worth revisiting those kind of public-private partnerships, because if you can show other organizations or businesses or companies that what you're doing helps get their customers to and from, or their employees to and from, then it makes sense that they may be willing to chip in some funding to get the projects keep going, because it benefits them. They don't have to find parking for their employees or customers if you can get those folks to and from their locations.
So, Penny, as the lone transit agency person on this, what role has technology played for your agency in moving the program past the pilot phase, if any? I know for us on the private side, we're used to iterating all the time. And so what role did that play for you guys?
I think, some transit agencies are faster to jump on, the latest innovations than others. Our agency was in a position where we had an app that customers could use to trip plan. We had some social media stuff going on. So it wasn't that we were, not using technology, but I don't think until we started the Mobility on Demand Sandbox project, I don't think that we had worked with any kind of app-based provider. We had some services that were kind of the more traditional, like similar to dial a ride, things that involve phone calls and scheduling ahead and things like that, especially for our paratransit service. And so our agency, this was a first, to think about people being able to want to go somewhere, punch a few buttons on a smartphone and be able to go somewhere. That isn't the traditional public transit way of doing things. So since I guess I would say since we had our mobility on demand sandbox experience, our agency became kind of more open to exploring what else technology could do for us, especially things that involved apps or real-time technology and service. And so, that we've had a lot of demonstrations and presentations given on lots of different tools that are out there. And since then, we've brought on some services that are app-based or kind of more innovative as far as technology goes. So that's not to say that, you have to have everything be the highest, latest tech possible in transit, because there are some parts of transit service that, they work well as they have been for a while, but the things that we've brought on in the last few years serve to enhance what we do. And I think the public in general is clamoring for that, because so many aspects of our lives now involve, I want it now technology. And so if we want to stay modern, and stay effective, we need to consider those things and adopt them as they are feasible and affordable.
If I can jump in on this, I think this is really true also for the private initiatives and pilot. I mean, sometimes we see some pilot that want to, excel in this technology gadget offer, and and this is sometimes very expensive. So I guess that really what, as I understood at least, the real major point is to find the good balance between the wish of people, users, and to have the right amount of or experience in terms of tools and technology and so on, and a practical aspect. This technology costs, and there's things known or less technological that works very well and are very, 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 very useful. An example: we are a cold city. Of course, there's a lot of snow, and -20 is rather common in winter. And battery from phones, they get down very fast. So sometimes the old card with which you open the car is much more effective than having everything on your smartphone. So sometimes it and I think this is a very, very, very crucial thing: being able to evolve with technology, but not to exceed and lose control of your costs because you want to have the best technology available at the time.
Marco, I totally agree. And there's lots of conversations in transit now about, mobile payment. And those are great. Those are super useful, especially during a time like COVID where, let's not touch anything, but that leaves out a huge sector of the population, the unbanked, who most of which use transit. So we have to be careful not to go too far into that end and leave out, again, the people who we are doing this work for, the people who are transit dependent, people who don't have cars, whether they choose to or because they can't have it. So to keep that in mind and make sure that going back to basics, who are we doing this for? Why are we doing it? And how is this going to best benefit them? So for some people, having mobile payments is going to be great. For others, it's not ideal, and we have to, as we're trying to improve mobility, particularly in the US, but around the rest of the world, we have to bear in mind those things, that there are all sorts of people, and Penny, you said this earlier, who need the service and who are going to use this service, and we need to be careful that we are creating a service that'll work for the people who need it most.
Yeah, I think something that we learned as we rolled out our MicroTransit that we're working on now, we had started one zone of service for that last August, and then put it on pause after a few months due to the pandemic limiting, the service use. And one of the things that we decided to do was, along with being able to summon one of the vehicles using an app or the call center, is that this sounds so simple, but it was an effective approach. We made little signs that could be put on the dashboard of the vehicle that said "in use" or "I'm available." And the idea was, the zone that this service was active in is a place that has a lot of pedestrians. It's a waterfront area, so there are people in parks and doing different recreational activities. And so we thought, if someone hasn't seen all of our wonderful marketing for this, for some reason, if they haven't been made aware of it, they will see this vehicle that has the branding on it, has the name Runner in our case, and then it has a sign in the window that says, "I'm available." And so we adjusted our service so that you could just walk up and kind of say, "Hi, can I have a ride?" rather than having to use the technology. And we thought maybe that would be a way to invite more people in if they had no prior knowledge about the service and didn't have the app on their phone and just wanted to give it a try on a whim. So that's an example of something that maybe doesn't seem high tech, but could actually uh, make the service more accessible to people or more appealing.
Hey, what about as you moved from pilot to permanent, what if any of what if any parts of the service or the program did you guys change? Was the permanent program just an extension of the pilot, or did you guys kind of take the lessons learned from the pilot to revamp the service?
Yeah, what we're working on now is more MicroTransit. We're not working with a transportation networking company this time, and again, that really resulted from the fact that to continue the model that we had during our sandbox pilot, we would have needed to have 2 or more provider partners, and we reached out, to try and procure another partner, but we were unable to find one. Um, if you're in an area where you have a lot of very active taxi companies and other transportation providers in a larger city, for example, that model may work better than it ended up for us not working out here, because we just don't have the kind of population density that supports a lot of different cab companies and things like that, and TNCs. So what we're doing now is more of a microtransit, where we work with a company that provides on-demand rides. Um, we also had a challenge during our pilot of getting the detailed data that we wanted, because the partner that we had certain rules in effect about what kind of data and to what granularity they would share, and we wanted something a bit more specific. And so in our microtransit model, when we work directly with a provider, we're able to say, these are the kinds of data that we would like to receive, and they're able to report that to us. So I think we're definitely incorporating a lot of the aspects of our pilot into this next iteration, but it's not exactly the same, but the end goal actually is the same. It's basically recognizing the fact that our transit service, our fixed route service, is not available in some areas, or at some hours of the day. And so we need something to fill in and support that fixed route transit. So the goal is the same. The method has just has changed slightly after those months of learning lessons and trying things and making changes and all of that.
I think that, the goal of a pilot is to learn things. And so, well, it's not a ideological. When you start something like this, you don't have to be ideological. Every city has its own characteristic, and every situation, need adaptation. And moreover, if you think in long terms, well, there will be evolution in the technology, in the needs of people, and so on. So, I think that you always have to be open to change and to learn from your pilot what has to be changed or what can evolve immediately, or maybe in the time, because sometimes you have projects that you will be able to implement only in longer terms, but still you understand they are necessary. If we would have stayed with the same kind of service that we had at the beginning, probably we won't exist anymore. That's, we still learn, even if we are a permanent service, from mistake and from things that doesn't work anymore, or, they are inefficient and so on. And so, being open and not ideological it's essential to make a pilot become permanent.
And I would add, the learning doesn't just happen on the side of the entity that starts the pilot. I mean, we learned a lot, but if you look at transportation networking companies, Uber and Lyft and others, from 2016, when we first received notice of our Sandbox Grant Award, until now, everybody has learned a lot. And there have been so many pilots and advances in technology, and that's helped the TNCs also develop, how they work with transit agencies and others. So it's very interesting learning experience on all sides, I think.
Absolutely. And I think that one of the things that we do best is learning from our clients, and also taking a look at it when we're doing some of these on-demand programs for clients, saying, hey, okay, this is the service that we wanted in, but it's a learning process together. Okay, maybe we wanted in this, but is this really where it's needed most? Maybe if we try it like this, we might be able to serve more people during this time, and taking those lessons back, taking them, whether that's our sales team, our customer relations team, marketing, or engineers, product managers, saying, hey, okay, so this is what we're hearing in the marketplace. This is what's helping people the most. And this is how we're going to improve our product or our service to, again, help more people, the end user.
And I give it one more minute. If you have last comments or closing remarks.
Well, if I have to say something about, in 27 years, we launched our first service that every city is a pilot project. I think that what Larin was saying at the beginning, understanding your how and what the people needs, and is the crucial things for every pilot to hope to be successful and become permanent. I think that this is the major conclusion I would say for my part.
I guess I would just say that if anyone out there is thinking about, running a pilot, don't be afraid to reach out to others that have done them. As Marco said, sometimes it's this what you deem a success. Other times you make mistakes and you have to make changes. But I think let those who've done it before give you some advice, and you can process that advice and then design a more successful service for your particular area, knowing what you know and then listening to what others have experienced.
Yeah, to both their Penny and Marco's points, just, don't be afraid to ask questions, lots of questions. Don't be afraid to fail, because in reality, there might be some successes that come through that. And if I may answer one question I see in the box or the chat, Mehul, I know I'm butchering your name, I apologize. He asked if we take MicroTransit and on-demand transit services as more than just feeder intermediate services, how do you think cities can plan for this future. So if I may, shameless plug, episode 122 of the Movement Podcast featuring Benji de la Pena, the CEO of Shared Use Mobility Center. We talk about this in that episode. So please take a listen.
Thank you. Thank you, three of you, Penny, Marco, and Lorin, for this dynamic conversation. We also invite you to visit the Shared Use Mobility Learning Center if you want to learn more about other cases.